You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It's Thursday, April 24th, 2025 at 7:35 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I thought that I would talk about uh, it's a funny idea and really pertinent to our times because we probably couldn't have had this topic until quite recently. But the topic is, how important are relationships in repairing attachment? I get so many requests from people saying, "Can't we use AI to automate the adult attachment interview? Can't we get AI to automate the ideal parent figure protocol? Can't we get AI to replace human beings altogether, and so we can have our attachment bot take care of our attachment repair?" Which is hilarious in a way. Christian.
George, I have a whole harem of AI girlfriends, and like I don't even need this attachment stuff anymore. It's just
You know, my position has always been that the telephone company, had they added attachments, could have kept their monopoly. You push on one end, it pulls on the other. Isn't that an interesting thing, the dilemma of that? The the human condition being what it is, we're really poor at self-perception. It's not really one of the things that's built into it. What we really are good at it is monitoring people's reaction to us and understanding how we are in relationship to that. And if we go with these bots, which are simply reflective of our inner life, with no contrast, to actually be able to see ourselves, off we go into, I'm going to guess, epic delusion beyond what we're ordinarily humanly capable of. Rather than some deep insight into the nature of ourselves and our conditioning. You could talk about attachment simply as attachment conditioning. What I like about it is, in the Buddhist endeavor to see clearly the nature of the human condition and to understand the spiritual nature of this life. The pathway to do that is to examine our conditioning. We have that conundrum of the human conditioning to be so much like everybody else, all other humans. We're just so much alike. Yes, we could make a division, a strong division between male sex and female sex, but still so similar. And then culture, and then class, and all of these things that divide up this perception of us. But still, we're journeying, all of us are journeying together in this human body, which has a limited range of sensing capacities, which has a limited range of intellectual processing, physical prowess. And we're all confined by these similar constraints. And then our conditioning is completely unique. And so the meaning that we're free to assign what happens to us is unique to us based on that. The accumulation of conditioned responses to things. And it's compounding. We make a meaning of something, and then we use it later as a reference to make a meaning to something else. And some of these memory threads, these meaning threads, go all the way back to the very beginning of life, even before there's a sense of self, even before there's a language or a definition of anything. That somatic experience of life. Antonio Damasio talked quite a bit about the self. I quite like the way that he talked about it. I think is it Ray Kurzweil who was the great proponent of singularity, where we simply merge with the machine. I keep thinking, merge with the machine. There's so much pleasure in this body, so much pain too, but did you ever want to grab onto a machine the way that you want to grab onto a body? Did you ever want a machine to smile at you the way you like some people to smile at you? It's silly most of the time when I think about that. Christian.
Or do you know in Terminator 2, at the very end, when they lower him down into the lava, like I've always fantasized about someone giving me a thumbs up like that. Just,
I don't actually remember that.
it's a great movie. It's always worth rewatching.
Yeah. Um, the big mission in life is to actually tell somebody who you are authentically and completely, and have them sit there and be totally happy to be in your company, totally delighted to be in your company. Of course, the insecure response is always that they would leave. Lucy seems to be wanting to go on an adventure. There you go. So I would say yes. You need to be in relationship to other people in order to begin to affect the change in attachment, because you need to have the confidence that when you express yourself authentically, that people's response will be interest and delight, and not searching frantically for the exits, which is what some of us envision. Mudit. Oh,
George, do people define the delight aspect differently?
I would think that it's based on what the expression of delight was in your family system, but at the same time, because we're so similar, the mechanism is built into the human spacesuit that we all wander around in. um,
I've noticed some people say that, oh, I'm taking delight in you, but the receiver doesn't receive it because it's not the same way that.
right. You don't recognize it. But then really, the mission of people is to learn them and to learn their expressions so that you can transliterate what you need to into the terms that they understand. I remember when I was a kid, if you did something wrong and my dad was about to lay into you, he would always go, "Oh," and then you knew that it was coming. And then I had a friend who would go, "Oh," when he was about to offer comfort, but I would just brace and be ready when he did that, even though he was saying something completely different. And so there is that transliteration, that automatic response of how the terms were defined in my family versus the automatic response in his family. And some of the conditions is pretty deep. If you say "oh" to me, I'm bracing. But then how did your caregivers do it? How did they do it? How did they communicate to you? And when you get to know somebody, can you understand how the conditioning is around that, and they're ready to go based on that? And so when you speak to them and when you try to respond when you try to express something that you want them to know. And it's different. Do you have the mentalizing capacity to translate it fast enough so that you're actually effective in communicating? You following me on that one? So if you're talking to me, that you don't say, "Oh, let me comfort you." You say, "Let me comfort you." Did you have delight when you were a kid? And if you didn't, how do you learn it? That's the operation of all of this. How do we learn to be in relationship to other people? How do we learn people well enough? How do we learn the vocabulary of someone else so that we feel safe in relationship to them? Hold on 1 second. Need to address Lucy. Lucy, come on. Yeah. He appears to have the zoomies. I don't know if you have a dog, but that's running around. The way that you're supposed to address it is by confining the spaces so that they're away from the stimulus. I guess we're a lot like that too. In the stages of secure attachment, the first one is feeling safe. How do you feel safe? And children have low intensity limits, so that the intensity in the environment needs to be controlled and needs to be predictable for them so that they can anticipate what's going to happen. And those are the things that tend to undermine secure attachment to things that are too intense. The range of expressions that are too wide so that the child can't manage them. Something predictable, but not predictable for an adult, of course, predictable for a child. So that the child can express themselves authentically. And so I often call it the arrogance of the secure, which is this expectation that you can express yourself authentically and people will be responsive to you. Because if you didn't grow up with that, you can't really do it very well, because you're always anticipating some different kind of outcome. And so the effortlessness, the freedom isn't there. Everything has to be mapped and predicted and calculated. Mudit?
So you an expectation not from everybody, but for extremely few number of people, because otherwise you come off as arrogant.
Well, it's not, I would guess it's not exactly arrogance, but if your expectation is that people will pay attention to you and be responsive to you, that can cause confusion when they don't. And it can cause a demand when they don't. You can be demanding of that kind of attention. I think that that's a good thing, and necessarily. But it can also produce a confusion in secure people, why insecure people can't do it. The Dunning-Kruger thing of, if I can do it, you should be able to do it. How hard is it? I've always been able to do it. Why can't you do it? And the reason you can't do it is because of arduous, terrible, terrifying conditioning that makes it virtually impossible to be able to do it without significant intervention and training. But they don't have any of those experiences, so they can't relate to them. They never had to lie. They never had to hide. They never had to defend in that way. And actually, they're not that good at it. So they can't even appreciate the level of deceit that one could get into. If it were so simple, all you'd have to do is hear it once. Oh, don't do that. No need. Just be authentic. But the whole emotional response to it is so intense it's not possible, really. The authentic thing, if you have access to it, appears in the mind, of course, but then you're immediately in that process of making reality into what action to take and what outcome is going to be the result of that. And most of the time, our expectations are based on things that have happened. And so if you have the expectation that things are going to go well and your needs and wants are going to be considered, it's a very different way of presenting yourself than if you're afraid that you'll be attacked, or you're afraid that your needs and wants won't be considered. It's very different. So for those of us who have the conditioning of insecure, disorganized attachment, it was an arduous journey to get there. While it's not so bad coming back from it, it still is a journey back. And it comes from rebuilding, in a way, the perceptual database, the capacity of the assigning of meaning to things. The authentic thing arises in the mind. If it frightens you that you'll be abandoned, then there's a spike of abandonment terror. And then immediately in the mind arises the inauthentic thing that you could do instead. And if you push into that, it immediately relieves the abandonment terror, which is where the delusion is in that Buddhist sense. You think that you're entering into security by being inauthentic, because it relieves the abandonment terror. But it puts you in a state of deprivation, which tends to produce anger. You don't ask for the things that you want, so you don't get them, and you're in a state of deprivation. In fact, if you don't test it at all, you think that if you ask for the things that you want, you'll be abandoned, because that's what happened. And then you're mad. You're mad that you can't ask authentically for what you need. You're mad that the other person is going to abandon you, even though there's no indication from them. This is all in your meaning threads. And then you express. Of course, if you do push into authenticity, it exacerbates the abandonment terror. Then if you can hold that space, you just sideswipe by the terrible sadness, which is the recognition that actually you're the one who's been depriving yourself of authentic connection, not anyone else, by simply refusing to be authentic. Now, there's a hierarchy, obviously. Some people you tell everything to, and some people you don't. But there are many of us that just don't tell anybody everything. They're just not, it's just not it. I worked for a dozen years in rehabs, and it was said over and over again, well, I don't tell anyone everything, but I do tell everything to 5 different people. Does that count? And actually, the answer to that is no, it doesn't. Would it?
George, there's one thing that I just kept forgetting to ask is the abandonment terror. We use this word. It would be like using a synonym as saying the fear of being alone. Why don't we use that instead? because it's
Because
more
I don't think it's the same thing.
that I'll be alone and hence I will not survive.
Alone,
Same thing.
when you get into exploring and to really pursuing meaning, the aloneness is actually an advantage often, where you get to be totally engaged without having to address the attention of other people. And in abandonment terror, the idea is that when you need help, it won't be available to you. When you need comfort, it won't be available to you. When you need protection, it won't be available to you. Now, some of us can say, I'm afraid I'll be alone forever, which is one thing. But then also in abandonment terror, the idea is that you express yourself to somebody, and in seeing who you are, they withdraw from you because they're repelled in some way by who you are. That would be abandonment. That in that most vulnerable moment when you turn to somebody and you express to them the thing that's essential for you to express, and they react to that in horror and withdraw from you. Nature of that. How do you know whether you're safe with somebody's if you don't tell them everything? You don't. And so the anxiety that they could abandon you is always there. Whereas if you're free to tell them everything with the expectation that not only will they stay, but they'll be delighted by your point of view, it's a very different expression. I use the metaphor of coming out of the theater. You can't wait to tell the person you saw the movie with that it's the worst piece of dog do that you've ever seen. And just as the words are about to come out of your mouth, they look at you with this goofy smile and say, "That's the most moving picture I've ever seen." What do you do? Are you free to say, "Oh my God, that was the worst piece of crap I ever saw. What did you see in it?" And just roll into a discussion where neither one of you are afraid that that you have a different opinion, right? Or do you clamp up and go along with the idea that it's an award winner in the future? Can you tell somebody what's going on with you with no fear that it will push them away? As John Bowlby famously said, you're only as needy as your unmet needs. If you're in a relationship where you never express your authentic needs, you're in a constant state of neediness. Because it doesn't happen very often that they coincide. But if you're free to ask for your needs and the people in your lives meet those needs, then you're not needy. We don't you make a request of your caregiver, and your caregiver is overwhelmed by the request and can't meet the needs. And they blame you for them. And so we begin to understand ourselves as needy. We begin to understand our needs as being unreasonable. But what 6-month-old is capable of manufacturing unreasonable needs? At a year old, what 1-year-old is capable of manufacturing unreasonable needs and being so demanding? There isn't intent in that. The range it might exceed the caregiver's range, but it isn't a child's calculation to be demanding, to be too demanding.
What's the the percentage across the population of secure versus insecure and disorganized?
Depends on the research group. I would say that the numbers that are most commonly quoted are 65% secure, 15% dismissing, 15% preoccupied, and less than 5% disorganized. But if you examine those numbers, what you would see is that they're studies that were done at elite colleges and universities, and they excluded for poverty. So, and that really is part of the whole political class of the, professional manager, and the focus on the ideal being that 10% of the upper middle class. So I would say that in the upper middle class, those numbers probably hold pretty well. If you look at the same group but don't exclude for poverty, it drops to 55%. But if you were to do a meta study of the population, I think the numbers would be more like 28% secure, 20% dismissing, 20% preoccupied, and 32% disorganized. Christian?
You're probably somewhat plugged into the like attachment kind of research or university world. Do you know of like ongoing research that's measuring this? I'd be particularly curious to see the effect that COVID had on like rates of sin. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think nobody's ever attempted to do a direct study of a sampling of the overall population to see what the actual layout of attachment is. Poverty is highly correlated to disorganized. That's why they're so high. I live in Los Angeles. 50% of the kids in Los Angeles are impoverished. I read something the other day, 75% of African American children at some point in their life experience poverty. It's hard to know. But we live in a time of unprecedented inequality. And remember, food, shelter, clothing, and medicine are the basics of care. If you're impoverished, there's no predictability for any of those. How do you manage that? And, I was talking to Mary Main about this, and she said, well, the work that Mettagroup does is admirable. It's a waste of time. Once your attachment is messed up, it's too hard to fix. I think that was before we had the technology of ideal parent figure. But what we should be doing is funding investment in teaching attachment parenting skills, and that as few as 12 interventions in early childhood could change the attachment outcome. And if we would provide reliable services for children, we could change that. But we absolutely refuse to do that as a society. There is zero chance at this point that could happen. But we don't mind spending $145,000 a year housing somebody in a medium security prison, rather than pay a fraction of that for somebody then who would be contributing to society. So it is really this huge moral failing, I think, of the West in the way they regard this. Christian?
George, are you familiar? I think it's called Circle of Security. These are these kinds of like adult, like parenting classes that I think kind of do that. that kind of
Not directly.
I haven't read anything in a while, but I read some good things that that they can have pretty profound effects on rates of kids becoming secure, while
Yeah.
the adults themselves don't become secure.
No, they don't. But as it turns out, you don't need them to be secure. They can still raise secure kids with the right intervention. So why aren't we doing that? Mainly because it disadvantages some kids that have advantages. Better that there's no competition. Hmm. So the idea then is to begin to identify people that are going to be useful to you in your life. And this is really organized around your exploration and the pursuit of meaning that you have. What is meaningful to you in your life? What is it that you want to do in your life? Where do you derive that sense of curiosity and interest? And then who do you need to know that's going to support you in being able to do that, and establishing those relationships and developing them so that they're available to you, so that you can pursue the meaning that you want. Hold on. Lucy, come on. I notice in the work that I do, a lot of the conversations at the beginning are about over and over again recommending that people try authenticity as a basis for relationships. And how you watch the mind each time somebody says something to you and the authentic thing arises, and then you don't want to say it because you're afraid that if you say it, they'll leave you. So you don't say it, which is in some sense ensuring that they will leave you. It's a paradox, right? But then if you say the thing that's authentic, and then they tell you whether they would leave you or they wouldn't, based on that, right? It's fine. Most of the time, it's fine. Most of the time, it lands the same way as the inauthentic thing landed, except that you're not frightened anymore because they've not left. Or if they did left, you've used much less energy to try and develop the relationship than you might have, because you kick those cans down the road and they come back to roost. To just mash up metaphors. Tell people, but you need permission from people to tell them who you are authentically, and they need your permission to be willing to do it. And little by little, you build this experience of trust. You really have no obligation to tell people you don't know everything. You make agreements with people that you'll tell them everything, and they make agreements with you the way that matches in an intimacy, that expression back and forth creates this sense of safety, but also this because what we're really looking for is this support and this encouragement to go for the things that matter to us, that we can't really go for without that level of support, because resiliency has its limits. Our inability to be self-reflective limits us, and we need that sounding board. We need that reflection. We need that support. But we don't need that many people either. I mean, how many intimate relationships can you have? In the Dunbar system, a primary relationship, an A relationship, most people have bandwidth for one of those. B relationships, people you tell everything to, but you don't have the same level of commitment to care for. Is it 2 or 3 or 4? Do you have an amazing capacity for relationships that you could actually have 5 of those people? It's not that many. Dunbar's research said that if you flow, I think it was 60% of your relational energy into those few relationships, you're much happier than people who don't. And most people don't do that. In the West, it's really 1A relationship, no B relationships, and C's. That you have one intimate relationship, no others, which is a burden in a way toward that one person. They have entire responsibility for your care. And then if they want to go off and do something for their own exploration, how do you tolerate the separation if you don't have anyone else that can regulate you? Whereas if you have that group of people that can help, then they can regulate you. And also then you're free to go if they have people that are regulating for them, not in a state of deprivation if you've left, so that it doesn't restrict your exploration. Makes sense? So even if they develop bots that have massive AI, it won't work. We need a human. We need a human to grab onto. We need a human to travel with. I was in Los Angeles. They have Waymo now, and Waymo are the driverless cabs. And there's a corridor that runs from Santa Monica out to downtown where you can get a Waymo, but it's not very wide, so you have to be going across. And they don't travel on the highway, but I'd not been in one and I was curious about it, so I ordered one in Santa Monica to drive me home near downtown Los Angeles. And it took about an hour and 10 minutes because they don't drive on the freeway. And by the end of the hour and 10 minutes, I was lonely. The Uber driver. Even though the AI was making jokes about what was happening. And it had a screen and it played music. By the end of it, I was lonely in the back of my driverless cab. So, why don't we do some practice? What do you think? What would you like to do? Vipassana. Okay. So go ahead and settle in. All right. Let go of the meditation. How's that? Good. So let's see. In May, we have a level 1 coming up. I think that's the next thing. Tomorrow is Kaleidoscope. We're going to talk about advanced mentalizing. And then we'll have a level 2 coming up soon. That's what's on the calendar. If you're interested, take a look. The 21st of June, I'm going to do a couple of exploration Saturdays back to back. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope that if you're able to make a donation, you can, and you can, please do. It helps support me and also the work that a group is doing. Really appreciate your practice, and I'll see you soon.